Hello everybody watching this video. Today we will be learning about square roots.
So let's get some basic fundamentals down. We will refer this as the radical sign or the square root of a number. And if the square root of A is equal to B, then B squared is equal to A.
So square roots and squaring numbers often appear in area problems. So let's take a look at this square right here. We have a 2 units by 2 units square. So to get the area, we would do 2 squared because the area formula is A equals S squared, S referring to one of the sides. And we get 4 units squared. And we can even look at that as 4. We get 4 because 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 squares.
So let's start with some basic square root problems. Now, let's say it's square root of 25. Now think of one number that when you multiply it by itself 2 times, gets you 25. It is 5. You may think that is the answer, but there's actually 2 answers. It's positive and negative. You may wonder why. Because positive 5 times positive 5 gives you 25, right? And negative 5 times negative 5 gives you 25. So, the answer to this problem is positive or negative 5.
Now let's try a different kind of square root problem. So let's take this out. And now let's say we have negative square root of 25. Now because we have this negative sign right in front of the radical, the answer will be negative 5. This is because the negative sign comes down, as you know, but the radical acts somewhat like a parentheses, and you got to do whatever first in parentheses. So, in conclusion, the answer would be negative 5.
So let's get another square root problem. Let me erase this and so let's do a problem that has the square root of negative 25. Now, you may think there is an answer, but there is no answer. It is no solution. You might wonder why. It's because there is no such number that gives you negative 25.
When multiplied by itself.
You may think it's negative 5 times 5, but negative 5 and 5 are different. So, therefore, the answer to this problem, the square root of negative 25 is no solution.
Now let's try doing a higher level problem. So, let's erase this. And let's do this problem. The square root of negative 25 times negative 4. Now before you say no solution, let's think this through. Remember, the radical sign acts like the parentheses almost, so you gotta do what's in it first. So we do square root of, now what's negative 25 times negative 4? Of course the answer is 100. And then the square root of 100 is 10. So therefore the answer to this problem is 10. Now this is just a review of what we just covered in that last slide. The square root of A would be positive or minus B. So for example, the square root of 9 would be positive or negative 3. the negative square root of a equal negative b, so the negative square root of 16 would equal negative 4. The square root of negative a had no solution, so like the square root of negative 49 had no solution. And the square root of negative a times negative b would equal the square root of positive a times positive b. So let's say but a and b are dependent variables, meaning it depends on what they are. But if we have negative 4 times negative 8, that'd be the square root of 32. Square root of 32 is not a perfect square, so we would need to estimate that, which will be coming up in a slide soon to come.
So here are 3 problems: square root of 121, square root of negative 49, and the negative square root of 81. So the answer to these problems are right here. The square root of 121 is equal to 11 because 11 times 11 gives you 121. The square root of negative 49 is equal to not possible because of the negative sign inside the radical sign. The negative square root of 81 is equal to negative 9 because the radical sign acts like parentheses. So you would do that first and stick the negative at the end. So as you can see, we do 9 times 9, and you stick the negative sign right here.
So now let's do another concept of square roots, and that'll be estimating square roots.
So estimating square roots could be hard, and they could be confusing, but they're actually pretty easy. So let's look at this problem, square root of 30. Since square root of 30 is not a perfect square, you have to estimate it. So take a moment and think about the 2 nearest perfect squares. It has to be square root of 25 and square root of 36. Since the square root of 30 is in the middle, we can use the less than sign. So the square root of 25 gives you 5. And the square root of 36 gives you 6.
Now in this, we don't include the negative because we're just trying to estimate.
So since square root of 30 is closer to square root of 25, the answer is less than 5.5. So if you check with the calculator, the answer gives you about 5.48. Therefore, our estimate right here is 100% correct.
Let's try another estimating problem. So now we have the square root of 43. That is not a perfect square, so let's think, what's the closest perfect square less than 43? And that answer is the square root of 36. And what's the nearest perfect square greater than 43? And that answer is the square root of 49. So 43 will fall, the square root of 43 will fall between the square root of 36 and the square root of 49. Now, the square root of 36 is 6, and the square root of 43 is still yet to be known, and the square root of 49 is 7. Now, since 43 is closer to 49 than 36, the square root of 43 will be greater than 6.5, but less than 7. And if we check with the calculator, the square root of 43 is approximately 6.56. So again, our estimate was correct. So let's try some guided examples. We'll go through this with you. Just follow along. So our first problem, the negative square root of 64. Remember, the radical acts like a parentheses, so we do whatever in it first, so 8, and then we bring the negative sign down, so that's negative 8, and that's our answer. The square root of 81, 81 is a perfect square, and the answer would be 9. But remember, this problem has two answers, positive and negative 9. Now, since the negative is inside the radical for this problem, the answer will simply be no solution. And for this next problem, remember the radical acts like the parentheses, so we got to do what's inside it first, because this becomes the square root of 64, which is 8.
So let's find the square root of 90 since it is not a perfect square. So take a moment and think about the nearest perfect square that is less than 90 and another square root that is greater than 90. So this would come out to be square root of 81, square root of 90 comes on the bottom, and square root of 100. The answer would be 9. The square root comes down of 90, which is less than 10. So since 90 is closer to 81, it would be 9 is less than the square root of 90, which is less than 9.5. And when we check it with the calculator, we get an estimate of about 9.49, and therefore our estimate is correct.
Now let's take a look at another estimating problem. We have the square root of 150. So let's think, what is the nearest perfect square that is less than 150? That is 144. So the square root of 144, square root of 150 comes down, and then the nearest perfect square that is greater than 150 would be the square root of 169. So that we write down. Square root of 144 is 12. The square root of 150 is still yet to be determined. And the square root of 169 is 13. So we can put the less than signs. So 12 is less than square root of 150, which is less than 13. So the square root of 150 will be between 12 and 13. Now, since 150 is closer to 144 than 169, we can say that 12 is less than square root of 150, which is less than 12.5. So basically, the square root of 150 will be between 12 and 12.5. And when we use a calculator, we get approximately 12.25, meaning our estimate was correct.
So now we will give you some independent examples. We will give you the answers at the end, but make sure you pause it and check if you get the answers right.
So in the last problem, you should have gotten 14. So here's another independent example. We will give you the answer, but make sure you pause it and try it on your own.
Yes, and the answers to the last problem, you should have gotten 10.5 is less than square root of 120, which is less than 11, and with the calculator you should have got approximately 10.95, and your estimate was correct. So for this problem, it should take a little bit more thinking, and with the same deal, we will give you the answers.
So for that last problem, you should have gotten the answer was 15 centimeters. And here's another problem, same deal as the others, pause it and then try to do it, and then we'll give you the answer at the end.
For the question above, your answer should have been 18, and for this problem, we will give you the answers, but just pause it and try it on your own, and we will give you the answers.
And of course, your answer should have been no solution. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned a little something about square roots. Until next time, adios.